Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on our latest webinar, From Insight to Innovation, Disrupting Traditional Market Research. These webinars are part of our series of talks to help creators on pre-launch launch successful products. So if you're not signed up yet, make sure you head over to prelaunch.com to discover how to find your ideal target customer, gather insights, and co-create amazing products together with your future users. While we wait for everyone to join, why don't we all open the chat? Where is it? Here in the middle. And introduce ourselves. I always like to break the ice by sharing three things: who you are, what you're working on now, and what you'd like to get out of this webinar. I'm Dan. I'm the head of community over at Prelaunch. And as I personally tended towards smaller brands, I'm super excited to hear about how larger organizations think about innovation. Welcome, Seda. Welcome, Amelia. Hi, Sam, Jenny, Lara, Mark. So while you're introducing yourselves, let me introduce our amazing speakers, Joachim, Jens, and Narek. Joachim has been leading FMCG innovation, that's fast-moving consumer goods innovation, for over 25 years. He was the head of global media and consumer insights at Henkel, a global powerhouse that has been innovating together with enterprise clients for nearly 150 years. He hasn't, Henkel has. I'm glad to have met him personally and can honestly say his ideas are truly exceptional. I'm excited to hear all the wisdom he's gathered while driving innovation at these large companies. Then Jens will take over and share how he's been applying creativity to innovation with his brand, Der Innovating. His Instant Innovate method is a practical framework that he shared with brands across the world, including Airbus, Atomic Skis, Daimler, Volkswagen, and Unity. Jens has spent his last 30 years bringing interactive, fresh, provocative views into enterprise environments. And his insights help brands power through the early innovation phase, from concrete ideas to their first prototypes. Finally, Narek will bring it home at the end, showing us how pre-launch can assist you through this innovation process. From researching your competitors to understanding your pricing model, finding your ideal customer, uncovering their hidden desires, and inviting them to innovate with you. And I think we're good to go.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Daniel and Narek, to have me with you.
So with all your experience at Henkel and in the FMCG space, why don't we kick it off by you letting us know what it was like in FMCG pre-COVID? Who was winning, who was losing, and why?
Sure. So I'm not sure if everybody is aware of what FMCG is about. It's fast-moving consumer goods compared, or is opposite to durables. It's a super interesting market of around $7 trillion of revenues per year. It has verticals like the packaged foods, the alcoholic and soft drinks, beauty care, home care, paper, consumer health care, and pet care. It's a market that has been historically growing by around 4 to 5% into the COVID area, 7% expected for the years to come. And if you look at the bigger players in there, they used to have the typical, let's say, competitive advantages, of great consumer understanding, brand building, innovation potential. They had scale and they have scale in production and retail, huge financial firepower, proven approaches, efficient processes, and so on. When you look at the larger FMCG, so let's say the top 80, 90 companies in the FMCG environment, you realize that until, let's say, 2015, they were growing around 20% faster and better than the average of the industry. And that picture has turned dramatically with COVID. And that's the point you're mentioning. How was it until COVID? Growth in the market did no longer come from the big corporates. They had, let's say, roughly 50% of the average growth of the total FMCG market. And who was winning? These were the small brands, the indie brands that looked to be much better in terms of consumer understanding, being more centric in terms of consumer or a go-to-market. They were super duper cool source for retailer differentiation. Growth was coming out of e-commerce and D2C, and this is very much linked also to the indie companies, which base their business models very much on D2C. And of course, coming out of the emerging markets, including China. And you have to know that in these areas of the world, larger companies have a market share disadvantage. So if this grows over proportionally, you have underproportionate growth for yourself. So what did you see in this market around this period? Billions, trillions of, let's say, pretty disruptive initiatives coming from the D2C and e-com environment, huge number of startups addressing new target groups, the green target group, the socially conscious target group, vegetarian, vegan, you name it, addressing fragmented markets. Think of Casper mattresses, even though mattresses is not FMCG, but a highly fragmented market, high margin categories. Think of razor blades with Harry's or the Dollar Shave Club, lifestyle and health, where typically you make margins of 70% and up north. And you had brands like Love Nature from our teams at Henkel popping up, Beyond Meat, Seventh Generation, the Dollar Shave Club and Harry's I mentioned, Invincible brands in Europe, or Just Spices that were initially extremely successful. And then what happened on the side of the FMCG industry until COVID? Well, they were pretty jealous of the growth that the smaller companies generated, and they tried to adapt themselves. So first appeared Jesus. So what was Jesus at the time in larger organizations? It's the CDO and the CDO organizations that popped up in almost every corporate, with everything related, agile working, design thinking. The big corporates started corporate venturing, so how to learn from startups in which you're directly invested. First party data was everything, and the topic was on my desk every day. What is the next hot D2C business you could buy and participate out of this? And it was also a reply in creating complexity in products and in assortments. So in order to be competitive at the margin, we thought that there was another need, so let's have a different product, and shelves were exploding. And that's the situation until COVID that we saw at the time. So a market that was historically driven by big companies, then for around 10 years by smaller companies, e-com, D2C, emerging markets, and bigger companies that tried to respond to this by adapting and transforming themselves.
And so that was fascinating. And now post-COVID, how have they kind of struggled to adapt? How do the innovation processes, these insight processes change?
Well, actually, where does innovation come from? Typically, it's of course consumer driven, and I talk about it a little bit. But you also have to think about technology driven innovations. So on ingredients, or let's say today sensorics. There are huge developments in sensorics, in AI applications that are used to innovate pretty broadly. It could be competition driven. So Henkel was the company that invented the pre-dosed liquid detergents. We gave it up, and then P&G jumped on it, and they're market leader worldwide on this. So basically, some sort of a copied or stolen idea. And that's something where large corporates can much more learn from smaller companies and tech companies. It's innovations which are partnering driven or M&A driven. So look at what Samsung is doing with laundry companies in Korea. Or when you look at all the acquisition that happens on green businesses that were bought by larger companies to be more innovative. Within the companies of the larger side, you have pretty much, let's say, efficient processes for innovation. It's about insighting, it's about ideation, it's validation, and then checking and optimizing in-market performance. And that has led for the core businesses of bigger companies, let's say, rather to incremental innovations. That was the point you were mentioning. The larger companies basically have the challenge. They have billions of projects. They cannot finance everything, so they choose the best projects out of many, typically based on quantitative methods. Large companies are obsessed by benchmarking. So they benchmarked on, let's say, sometimes pretty dubious market research methods, projects against each other in order to choose the one that made it up. And with regards to what happened on the, let's say, indie businesses and the D2C business that popped up, corporates invented, let's say, new ways of working for the newer businesses. So on breakthrough innovations, when they investigated into IoT projects, into services, by having separate teams, internal incubators, more focused on making the one project much better over time with more customized and qualitative methods, but also very much D2C focused, so high ROI. And it turned out to be in the end with pretty low scale. So not having the mass that was needed to survive as a big corporate.
Great. And then how did this change post-COVID? That was kind of pre-COVID, if I understood that correctly, right?
It is still on pre-COVID, and then we had COVID, and everybody remembers the ships stuck in the Red Sea, supply chain disruption, service level that dropped, especially in North America, from 99% to 75%, which is 25% of turnover as an equivalent, just to make it tangible. COVID, by the way, changed completely the way how consumers looked at brands. There was, as of a sudden, a much bigger trust to well-established brands compared to the smaller brands that popped up the 5 or 7 or 8 years before from the startup businesses. And there was a big thing that we call back to basics in order to assure deliveries. So you focused on the 80-20, main SKUs on the shelf, and that was an issue for the smaller brands, private labels, a lot of companies going bankrupt. Then came Ukraine, and associated to this, the raw material crisis. So if I remember at Henkel, our feedstocks went up for the most critical materials by plus 40 to plus 100%. And just imagine then, if your raw materials represent, let's say, 40% of your turnover, that is the equivalent of 15 to 20% return on sales, which is for most of the industry 100% of the EBIT that everybody was making. So the reaction into this that we saw from everyone, and it still is going on into end of 23, beginning of 24, is a continuation of a strategy that is back to basics, cut complexity, focus on the bleeders, 80-20 rule, pricing. When I was still at Henkel, we had at one time the target of having the equivalent of 10% of our turnover as price increases needed to mitigate the cost increase that we had. The other effects that most probably everyone remembers is interest rates were going up, cash flow issues for the smaller companies going bankrupt, venturing in M&A significantly going down. At the same time, look at social media. Social media cost increased, so the cost of customer acquisition went up, and a lot of D2C businesses, including the ones that we have bought as large corporates or we try to copy, really suffered. So the result on the market is that right first year of COVID, I remember the market was for the first time in 20, 30 years negative. For around, I think, 3%, if I remember correctly, jumping up the year after and being constant at 7% every year now, year after year. And since then, the large players have clearly outperformed the average of the market and the small players, by the way. So since 2020, after having been beaten by the small startups and the indie brands for many, many years. So what is the impact on innovation of this? This was the second part of your question. So back to basics, that means innovations rates are down. The adventures, let's say, of the years before had been stopped in most of the corporates. The motto in many companies is we have to become better before we become bigger, profit before growth and share, cutting assortments, focusing on core assortments, innovating marginally, cutting not needed activities. So everyone has cut down on the breakthrough inno teams, on the internal incubators, on corporate venturing, which, by the way, has a mixed results in terms of efficiency, I must say, instead of having external incubators. And there's a clear orientation to mass marketability with all the consequences on what this means on innovation and how to test innovations. There's one big thing that is, as opposed to be focused on digital channels that we saw before, focus on omni-channel with less innovative possibilities, by the way. Now, on the short term, however, you observe, if you look at market shares, Euromonitor, etc., you see that with all the pricing the big companies have done in order to get back to profitability and to assure growth, the smaller brands start to win again, private label starts to win, and I think they will be having pretty good chances in terms of bringing new innovations to the markets in the FMCG environment for the next year.
I'm glad you ended on that note because it sounded kind of dim with all these big companies focusing on incremental improvements rather than big innovations. Because yeah, there's a lot that smaller tech companies brought to this innovation ecosystem and adapting their products to suit these new realities. And I wonder, like, what lessons, if this is the last question, what lessons can larger organizations learn from these smaller tech companies to foster innovation? Joachim.
Well, I think the big issue is that large corporates don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There have to be measures to be done in terms of efficiency and focusing, let's say, on the more promising thing. But if I think about stuff corporates can learn from the smaller companies and the tech companies and the startups, that is, I mean, thinking in ecosystems. We don't do this in large corporates. So it's about products. It's about, I mean, if you're in cleaning, you can do cleaning products, but you can also do services in terms of cleanings. You have to think about the content. You have to think about the communities, about data ownership, exploitation of data, and the tech infrastructure that is needed to run communities and content. So that's something that we don't do as large corporates enough. It's something where we can learn from the smaller and especially the software companies, thinking about more in terms of platform economies, network effects. It's a discussion I'm having with Narek once in a while. That is, I find highly inspiring, where we could learn in the FMCG area. It's about open innovation, partnering, sharing, and adapting. And I think Jens will talk about it, a little bit less of this not invented here thing. It's about, you know, not making the perfect product, going into MVPs. I remember that there's a guy, a professor, and I think he's in Stanford, Alberto Savoia, who says once, you don't even have to do prototypes, you should have pretendotypes. I mean, a fake prototype, so less perfect it is. And I think that's something large corporates who are 300% perfect could learn about. It's about the culture of consistent improvement of the one idea you really believe in, and that's why you're a founder, you're a startup guy, you're doing, instead of this in-out mentality if we have in larger companies, meaning, well, if the innovation from last year does not work, well, we replace it in the shelf, we try it with something else completely different sometimes. And it is about culture. And it's about being less hierarchical, less ego, more facts, less politics, more hands-on, more holistic responsibilities for individual people, that I do believe foster innovation culture that is much stronger, even if I've seen pretty stubborn founders, but which is much stronger on the average than in corporates, and that I do believe that we can learn from as large FMCG companies.
Thank you so much, Joachim. That was a lot of information, and I'm sure like people will be watching the replay for this to make sure they caught everything. We've kind of run out of time for question and answers now, but if you had any questions for Joachim, we can ask them in the chat, and we'll ask them at the end of the webinar. And yeah, without further ado, Jens.
Yes, thanks. So coming to Joachim's point of innovation culture, and I would love to share my heart project, the individual creative talent. So allow me to share some slides to underline my message. So I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So Daniel, you mentioned post-COVID and in times of poly and perma crisis, well, what I see for the moment, that a lot of companies are more on the left-hand side, more on the fear side. So they are much more reactive than proactive. And I see less companies more on the right-hand side, so motivation by lust and passion, creating something totally new. And we need for sure here a mental shift more on the right-hand side. And Joachim mentioned the topic of innovation culture. And for me also, it's extremely important that the right people are really on the right places and working on the right jobs. And I'm not sure how it is in your company or in your country, but in Germany, unfortunately, it's not part of the school system to find your individual creative talent. So I started my career, whatever, in the chemistry area, studied chemistry as a technical engineer. And then I found out I was totally on the wrong way. So my way was much more inspiration and these lateral thinker. And then once upon a time, it was the 1st April 2008. I had this typical corporate feedback speech with my superior. And he gave me a feedback which totally surprised me on the strengths I've never seen. And this was for me motivation, working on it with a tool. So what is really my inner motivation? And then I took a decision. So focusing 100% on my strengths. And this is really my heart topic now. And this is also, I do this also in speeches in universities and schools and so on. Find your inner passion. And I use this tool here, working on 3 circles. What are my values? What are really my hot topics? What is really my passion, where I'm in the flow? And what does the market need? In 2008, I used this tool and I replaced what does the market need with what does Henkel need. And this was not an exercise for 10 minutes. I worked on a big flip chart, I would say for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, there was a really crazy thought. I said, hey, Henkel needs a corporate nerd or a corporate freak. Out of the typical hierarchy, who brings in topics and scenarios and provocative topics nobody wants to hear, because it occurs change. So then I had a meeting with the board, and my proposal was to change the department to marketing and to create this department. And then my board was, for my surprise, convinced, and after 3 months, we created this job. And my role was bring in stuff from totally different areas, from food, from cosmetics, from pet, from architecture, from whatever area, and try to translate these external topics into the world of beauty care or into the world of detergents. And if you try, and this is really my deep message to you, use tools like Ikigai, MBTI, Gallup, whatever, to find out what is really your inner motivation, and then takes a decision, focus really on these topics. And all my weaknesses, like whatever, figures or business plans or text, I delegate to others, because my weaknesses are the strengths of others. So really, my question to you guys is, so what is your superpower? And please feel free to use this tool to find it out. And companies always talk about whatever, sustainability, they talk about diversity, but diversity is always translated in man, woman, gender, skin color, religions, whatever. What I totally miss in companies is also diversity in terms of mindsets. So you need the pragmatic guy, you need the controller, you need the freak for teams. And here I also would love to invite the companies much more translating diversity in terms of mindsets, really also allow a little bit, a touch of craziness also in your organizations. and translate these typical wording of KPI, translate it in and keep people involved, keep people informed, and keep people inspired. And when I visit companies, or when I do whatever creative exercises with teams, I have always 3 pillars of information. So what are the latest technologies? So what are whatever latest ingredients, materials, technologies, whatever. Second part is consumer insights. What are the latest consumer changes in behaviors? What are pain points, whatever? And the third pillar is anticipate and lead. What are future threats in a positive but also in a negative sense? And when I join a company, I've always hundreds of pages. I post all this stuff onto the walls. And what we do is try, and I'm a fan of Richard Branson, and he invited sometimes the rule of ABCD. So always connecting the dots. So combine technology with a consumer pain point, with a future topic. And it's an amazing source for inspiration. And here also involving all the different areas of creative mindsets, departments like marketing, market research, R&D, salespeople, and so on, and working together on these different topics. And where I find the stuff, I do a lot of trend walks on fairs, but also in different cities. And if I'm working, for example, on a food topic, I don't inspire with food insights. I always inspire with over-the-edge inspirations from totally different areas. Short term, so what's currently in the market, but also some long-term hypotheses. And here I would really love to invite the companies. Yes, for sure, companies have a marketing department, they have a sales department, they have an R&D department, they have a market research department. I see only a few companies with a really consumer insights area, and in less companies with a strategic foresight company. So the trend is your friend or the trend is your end. And for me, it's extremely important to have at least a person or a small team working on future topics and translating future topics and provocative hypotheses and really provoke a little bit internally in the organization. And the mindsets you need, and this is not a list from my side, is an OECD list. You find it on the internet. It's an OECD skill reports. What are the skills for 2030? Yes, for sure, you need to understand the figures and so on. But for the future, you need 7 skills: ability to learn, complex problem solving, flexibility, resilience, also to jump over all these internal barriers. Also a little bit of critical thinking. So why are we doing this stuff we did the last 10 years? Why not doing this totally different regarding processes, also regarding sources? Empathy for consumers, but also empathy for changing markets. Creativity, and also self-management. And for the evening, for this webinar, I add 3 extras. So you need also a high degree of intuition, curiosity, and pragmatism. So really do the stuff and don't test whatever for years. Do the stuff and also very fast. Come really into the progress. And a lot of companies try to be perfect, but you never reach 100% perfection. And perfection is also boring. It's boring for the people internally, but also for your consumers. Try to come up with an idea in the very first prototype, test it. So this typical design thinking approach, very pragmatic and very fast. And my hot topic is what my starting point. Find out what is really your inner passion and then focus on it, and for 100%.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that insight-packed presentation. I was happy to hear about your move from electrical engineering to more creative path. I'm a civil engineer myself, and I followed a similar transition into branding and product launching. So it's good to see there's a future in this. There's a few questions in the chat. Let's go with Hazer. He asks, how can you foster a culture of innovation in a startup?
I guess it's a question to also to Joachim and me. But for me, what I also, as I mentioned, I miss in a lot of companies the topic of consumer insight. I miss in a lot of companies the topic of an active foresight management. But I miss also some basics. A basic for me, for example, what is really the vision of the company? What is the long-term target? And a vision based on the company's strengths for the next, whatever, 10 to 4 years. And if you ask whatever CEOs, from my experience, a lot of CEOs can't answer this question. What is really the way to the future with your team? And also, what is the way to address it also to your customer or clients? And also, you have to take a decision. Are you on the way to exploit on doing in the future small innovations and be a copycat? Or are you on the way here for think big and have really big ideas and really surprise your consumers and surprise your competitors with really relevant innovations from the consumer's point of view?
If I may, so I'm not the startup guy, so maybe you should answer the question yourself, Daniel or Narek. But from my observation, startups tend to have the opposite problem from large corporates, and that is because they work on this single thing. They're getting blind to the let's say challenges that the single idea they're going after might have. From my discussions with founders who are so much in love with their technology, for example, it is sometimes extremely hard to discuss with them other options to exploit the technology or other options of go to market. And sometimes when the love for technology and this single thing is so big, there tends to be also, let's say, a certain lack of consumer centricity in the end. It is what we use today is a make to sell approach instead of having sense and respond as an approach. So I think that it's a pretty good question. I think you can address it from looking at it inversely to what the issues are in larger corporates.
Okay, thank you, Joachim. Thank you, Jens. We've kind of run out of time for questions now. We'll come back to more questions at the end. But I'd like to throw one thing out there for both of you that you can think of while Narek presents. You both talked a lot about research, trends, creativity, innovation. I'm wondering where you turn to for this research and trends. Are there any websites, resources that you'd recommend to our viewers? And also, you had a slide about 2028 and beyond, and that we need to be thinking forward to the future. And I'm curious if you have any predictions of your own that you think these are some niches, some industries that startups can focus on. And so while you're thinking about that, Narek, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, guests. Amazing insights, very inspiring, very informative. So I'd like to continue, the topic of innovation, and Joachim already mentioned a couple of really interesting philosophical directions which we are advocating ourselves at pre-launch. Like one of them was the concept of prototyping, right? To create a concept and then make data-driven decisions as you go, rather than invest all your resources and all your energy and hopes into the products that you don't know whether they'll succeed or not. As we're speaking about innovation, one of the challenges and one of the problems on why companies don't innovate that much is that it's expensive. Otherwise, everybody would start, a lot of big ideas, invest a lot of money in it, and then some of it might work, right? So why big corporations and also startups are not innovating? Because it's really expensive, not in terms of money, but also in terms of resources, opportunity costs, etc. So what we're advocating and what we have found out is that it really makes sense to basically start talking to your customers as early as possible, right? And there are like a lot of areas and important ways on how to identify your customers, how to make sure that you're speaking to the right customers. But the sooner you get to your customers, the sooner you'll get good insights. And what we call it, we'll start co-creating with your customers along the way. So that's a couple of areas, and that's our philosophy on what we are advocating. And on this note, I wanted to share a presentation that I just noticed today. So this is not my presentation, full disclosure on it. And this is a presentation. The ideas are from one of my favorite author, Robert Cialdini. He's the author of the book Influence, which is basically a must read for everybody who is in marketing and also in the business. Like, I really recommend this book to read, you all guys. And here's what he found. It's one of the biggest ways to foster customer loyalty. And why this is important at this stage, at the stage of AI revolution and technological revolution, right? Because with all these AI and tools, the productivity goes up. And with more productivity, the competition goes up, because smaller companies, startups, they try to compete with bigger companies. And the customer loyalty is one of the critical things that matters for all the companies, right? So there is one way which helps different types of organizations to foster their customer loyalty and also identify their customers at an early stage. And that's really impressive. So here's what it's about. And here's what Cialdini calls one of the most interesting areas. You know, it's research based and works really well. And it is co-creation. So co-creation is a way that you are onboarding your customers at an early stage to the design board and start getting not only like feedback from them, but involving them into your creation process. And it shows that this process not only helps you make data-driven decisions and move forward confidently at each phase of your product creation, but also boost your customers' loyalty, right? So the more you involve your future customers into this creation process, the more you will boost their loyalty, and the more they'll become your advocate and help you also design a really, really good informative product. So with co-created products, your product will better target its audience, and also the process of co-creation increases a feeling of togetherness. So, and why I'm bringing this topic up now, because what we identified with pre-launch, and if you guys are not familiar with what pre-launch does, is that on pre-launch, you basically create a concept of your product, place it on the platform, and then people who are interested to buy this product in the future, they put down a small amount of deposit to reserve a discount or get a perk if this product is ever launched into the market, right? And why this is really interesting, because this way you also validate who your customers are. So you validate who are your customers, and then as long as you validate your customers, because they have this real purchase intent, right? They've proved that they really want to buy this product that much that they're ready to give you even $1. And for us, it beats 10 promises out there. So behavior is much more powerful. Behavioral kind of ways are much more powerful than opinions. So this way you get your customers on board and start to co-creating with them your products. And a really interesting thing is that those people are ready to give you the insights for free, literally, because they are authentically interested to get a really good product. So like, if we compare this to the typical panel surveys and focus groups, etc., where brands are going and paying the panels to get their insights, imagine a situation where your future customers are paying you and are ready to give you even more insights and get on board and help you create a really good product. Why? Because they're really interested to get genuinely interested to get a really good product at the end of your journey, right? So when we discovered this, we tried to get more and more customers after they reserve the product to connect them with the brands, get more insights, get more discussions. And this is fostering the innovation so much that it brings ideas from not only within the team, which in many cases works in isolation, but it brings ideas from outside of the world and then creates this big team with your customers where a lot of ideas emerge. Jens mentioned this very interesting point of diversity, and I truly believe that that's basically the foundation of innovation, when you have really diverse ideas and mindset and people who interact with each other. And imagine you as a brand, and then your team connects with your future customers who are even more diverse, and then they give you all these ideas for you to process and create something really beautiful. We have tried, we're a startup. We have started a couple of years ago, but we already have about 400 or 500 projects that we have created. And we've seen this working every time, every time when the brand listens to what the customer says, listens to the insights on what they're truly caring about, and then also makes sure that they're listening to the right type of targets. Every time it goes to success, right? And also what's also really interesting, when you see that something is not working, you learn about it at an early stage, and just try to pivot, move around, change a couple of hypotheses. But eventually, if it's not working, you don't invest all your life into something and resources, which ultimately doesn't have a big potential. So this is why we are so big advocate of this philosophy of co-creation, meeting your customers early, and co-designing in an agile way products that makes more sense for overall customers. For some reason, it's really hard, especially in the corporations who love to make things a bit secretive and in isolation, and are more afraid for the competitors to steal their ideas. But what we see for medium and small size companies who are adopting this process, they are getting much more benefit rather than threats and challenges. Yeah, that's it on my side. If you have any questions, happy to go over them.
Okay, thanks so much. Any questions for Narek, please ask them in the chat. Thank you so much, Narek. I've seen you talk about pre-launch so many times, but every time it feels fresh. There are a few questions from our guests that I think you'd be well positioned to answer. How do you test purchase intent? This was asked early on.
Probably this question is to me. What we do is the following. Imagine you have this idea, a concept of the product or design of the product or even a prototype. So you create this product page on pre-launch, and then drive traffic using social media, or if you have communities, you can drive your communities to that page. And then people who are really interested to get this product, if you produce, they're putting down small amount of deposits, like $1 or $10, depending on the price point. And this earns them a discount or a perk. And if you're ready to produce the product, you're giving them this discount. If not, they are getting refunded, so they can change. If they change their mind, they can cancel it and they'll get a full refund. But even with this $1, they give pretty much the strongest signals that they really want to buy this product. So it makes it behavior-based, and it makes it all the data and all the analytics that we are analyzing. Essentially, pre-launch is an analytical tool which gives you a lot of data and a lot of insights on how well you're doing. But the foundation of this is this buying intent of people that we're testing, right? So this gives us confidence that the data is reliable. And then as we have this confidence, we're using all these AI tools, new technologies to get these really deep insights that sometimes it's even not possible for humans to get there.
Great. And now this question is directed at you, I think, but we can open it to Joachim and Jens as well. What's the most impressive co-created product you've seen?
Nice question.
Yeah. And let me say, while you think that this co-creation, this idea of co-creation has really struck a chord in the chat, lots of people are loving this concept and discussing it amongst themselves. It's great.
Jens, I would say Love Nature was something that was pretty much co-created, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. As a whatever detergent and cleaner brand, yes, we invited here also a lot of consumers to participate and to translate the need for sustainable solutions in a different way. Yes, for sure. I've also another one in my mind. Unfortunately, I lost the brand, to be honest. One I've seen in the US, and I've seen also one brand in Germany, a cosmetic brand who invited their crowd via social media to co-create formulations, but also the range of products. And they used all the different tools in social media to invite here the crowd. And this I liked also very much. But only to underline one topic, it's a pleasure to build up consumer insights 24 years also within Henkel. And we visit also a lot of households. And these days, also the expectation of the internal people was, I go to a household or I listen to a consumer, I see a problem, and they also expected a solution by the consumers. And please, I would love to invite you guys to be a treasure hunter for consumer pain points, be a treasure hunter for consumer problems. And the intellectual transfer is must-have of the company. So you can do it for sure as co-creation process with the consumers, but don't expect only the solution by your consumers. But the consumers are an amazing source for inspirations.
100%. I also agree. I know a couple of big brands who are also now and then before continuously using the co-creation. Like one of the examples that I can recall is Starbucks. So before Starbucks was purely a coffee company, and then it was struggling, so things were not going as planned, etc. And then they started to ask their customers like what we need to change. And the way Starbucks started to offer food and other sweets in the Starbucks, as far as I remember, came directly from their customers who brainstorm together how they're gonna help the brand to become better and what basically they need. I know that Nike has been using co-creation a lot, so they even have these closed groups of people who have been designing shoes, giving these inspirations to the professional designers on what they can use in the shoes. And a couple of really successful models came from these co-creation processes.
Yeah, you can also for sure build up your own advisory board. Your external advisory board could be universities, could be freaks from other companies, could be consumers for sure, and turn like an advisory board. But may I answer your question, Daniel? You created 10 minutes before, and perhaps I can share only five areas, five simple areas for the future, and what people would love to have post-COVID in times of poly and perma crisis. So stop selling only products, start helping the people. And the five areas are, and it doesn't matter if you are creating roll-ons for deodorants, if you create whatever sneakers, if you create whatever mobile phones. One is make the life of the people easier. So reduce these extreme complexity. So I do not need a 300-page of manuals. So I would love to have self-explaining products. Make my life more convenient. So we reduce stress. Give me with your solutions time. So leisure time. Do not waste time with understanding your products. I would love that your products solve a lot of problems and deliver times. Give me a feeling of security also in these days, even more and more important, and be 100% transparent also with your solutions. Whatever, explain your formulation, explain the ingredients, what is in and why. And these are, from my point of view, 5 simple areas you can combine with your current solutions to create an upgrade.
Thank you. That's given us things to think about. And while you're answering questions, Margaret has a question that I think is directed to you. Especially because you've worked with so many brands innovating. How do you balance the insights from consumers with the founder's vision? And what if they change the product idea or the company idea too much?
I received a lot of typical internal killer phrases. So when I did these qualitative consumer insight stuff, so I'm not an Excel sheet, I'm not a number cruncher. No? So when I visited households and I did this all over the world, and the main question was, Jens, okay, nice insight, but how many people has the same problem, or how many people do it in the same way? And interestingly, I've one workshop in my mind from India, and there was only one lady giving a feedback to an ingredient, and at the end, this golden nugget ingredient, it was, I guess, an ingredient called neem, also NEEM, which is totally famous in India and has some hygienic properties, was at the end the magic claim for a highly successful detergent launch. And sometimes you have really to convince that even only one person has really the golden sword or the golden nugget. It's not always the Excel sheet.
Yeah, great insights. That's often the case where you kind of find one nugget of wisdom in somebody's feedback. That's the golden insight rather than all the data. That's why you have to have the combination, no qualitative and quantitative.
It's really it's the balance. No?
Okay. Joachim, after Narek's talk and your talk, I'm thinking, what do you think pre-launch can do to support the typical FMCG brand in innovating better?
I think pre-launch, as I understand it, is a pretty cool tool where you have the combination of qualitative and quantitative approaches. The issue on co-creation and on the co-creation is done with 10 consumers that you invite to your company, or focus group of 10 people to whom you ask questions, etc., is rich in insights of the 10 people, but how representative is it? Pre-launch has a huge platform where it can be qualitative and quantitative due to the sheer size of the community. And then Narek mentioned it as well. I think in your proposition you have a built-in co-creation approach, which is, I have to say, unique and fantastic. There was a question of someone in the audience on purchase intent. Purchase intent and the bias you have here is a huge topic in traditional market research. And the more, let's say, socially desired something is, the more fake is the outcome of traditional market research. If you think about green brands, I mean, Narek, do you like this brand that proposes you the cleanest and greenest cleaning solution for your kitchen? And by the way, you help poor people in Africa with it. I mean, you will say yes. And then in the end, helping poor people in Africa and having ingredients that are much better than the standard ingredients of a cleaning product cost more money, and you have to pay the double price in the shop in the end. Well, you don't buy it. And Jens and myself, we have been struck with a huge gap between what people declare and how they behave, and the way how you approach it. And we've tried to do it with crowdfunding initiatives on our side, is a pretty good approach. And then there is a huge bias if you're in a large corporate and you have big countries such as Germany or US or UK, you tend to be very centric to your base country, and you pretend that what's happening, what's true in Birmingham must be true in Yerevan, and by the way, the same in Nairobi. And on the other side, you don't have the money, even in the biggest corporations, to test it in different areas. Your platform is present in different geographies and on a statistically significant way. Or you could check this stuff more on a global basis than any kind of, let's say, pragmatic studies I know of. And then what is interesting, let's say, for the less rich big companies, is the ecosystem that I see around. So it's about helping in terms of ideation. I saw that you're having a new tool where pretty simply you can put into life new ideas. You add to this the co-creation opportunities, the validation, and the data that you generate is getting super insights before you even start on ideation. So that's something I typically don't see in tool providers or in method providers elsewhere. And then maybe one last thing, which I find important that you're doing, maybe you could be doing much more, and that is checking price elasticities. If you look at the FMCG industry, the single most important reason for driving sustainable growth over time is having the right, so low elasticity in terms of pricing. So finding the right combination of attributes of your product that allow you to price better is a valuable insight that is pretty difficult to assess with the more traditional methods. So that's why I do believe you have a USP. And honestly, while we were working on a couple of projects in Henkel, I would have loved to have a platform such as pre-launch to our availability, I must say.
Thank you. Thank you for that glowing recommendation. I'm sure everyone's diving over to prelaunch.com now. We've hit the time limit. There's this one interesting question, this fear, and it kind of touches on that now. If everybody's going to go over to prelaunch.com, it's this fear I've heard a lot, and it's how do you prevent big companies from stealing our ideas, making some changes and selling them as their own, especially in this idea of pre-launching, getting our ideas out there on the web. There is this slight uncomfortability that people will steal our IP. So I think Narek, maybe you'd like to answer this one.
Yeah, we're getting asked this question. Probably this is the most common question we're getting asked. First of all, there are ways on how we are, protecting the IPs, preventing it from mass exposure. Like we have these private testing modes where you don't expose the products to everybody. You can have people sign NDA before exposing your products to them, etc. So there are a couple of ways, depending on how early you are and how afraid you are on that your ideas might be stolen. You can protect them using different types of IP protection methods that we have at pre-launch. But I wanted to mention that I don't really believe that competitors are going to steal the ideas and then move into the markets really, really quick. There might be cases, but if we take the software industry, for example, like in the past 30 years, software industry became lean, and the lean methodology became a religion basically in software. And nobody really is afraid that anybody could steal an idea and then build a better software, right? Everybody is presenting their minimum viable product into the market, learning how to build it, and then moving along with their customers. I believe the same should be in the hardware, in the CPG. And even if your competitors enter into the market first, remember this co-creation thing. With the co-creation, you have more data, you have more insights, and it's not always that the first takes all, right? We have a really powerful brands, really powerful products, which are not the first, entries into the markets. But if you're doing it right, you'll get a much more better products, help your customers in a better way, as Jens mentioned, and understand their insights, their needs much more than your competitors do. So I myself, I'm advocating for not being afraid from the competitors and ideas stealing things, But in case for some reason, you know, you want to keep it private, we have the ways.
I fully agree with what Narek is saying. Honestly, the question was a bit also a link to the larger corporates that steal the ideas from the small ones. Huh? So don't underestimate the not invented here syndrome that you have in larger companies. Don't underestimate the let's say speed or the low speed that these companies have to do it. And don't overestimate, let's say, don't think that different companies that work in the same areas are not aware of the basic trends and the needs, etc. They struggle, you know, to bring the horsepower on the street, to have the right go-to-market strategy at the right time and fast. So I would also be a bit less afraid of this. And then in the end, really disruptive, innovative approaches will only become a real success if they become mainstream. And I would say in that respect, competition is also building markets. If you're the only one on a great idea which remains small, I mean, you don't get rich neither. So I go back to the example of the pre-dosed liquids. This was especially a money-losing category in laundry detergents because there were a few companies being more or less alone for too much of a time before everybody jumped on it. It was a segment that was maybe 2, 3, 4, 5% of the market. Now it's 25%. It's starting to get interesting financially. Now, having said this, you should have access to patent experts on critical things around your ideas. That is something that is really needed. And don't be afraid, by the way, of patents that you register. It takes quite a few time to become available to other companies what you have registered or you're trying to register.
Okay, thank you. That's a great note to finish on. There are quite a few more questions in the chat. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we'll try to send them together with the recording of this webinar via email. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you to our fabulous guest speakers, Joachim, Jens, and Narek, for sharing their fascinating insights. I know I learned a lot. I enjoy being here as always. And yeah, again, I'd like to mention that these webinars are part of our pre-launch series. Be sure to check out prelaunch.com if you're thinking of launching a product soon. As Narek said, it's great for finding your target audience, gathering insights, and co-creating amazing products together with your future users. It's 100% free to get started. And as an added as an added bonus, you'll always get an invite to these webinars in the future. Yeah, thanks.
Super.
Thank you again.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the invitation. Thanks a lot.